Hi, I'm Tony Northrup for TrainSignal, and in this video lesson, we're going to learn how to configure backups in Windows 8. This lesson maps to Objective 7.1 of the Microsoft Certification Exam 70-687 Configuring Windows 8. It has three sub-objectives. Create a system recovery disk, which is something you can put into the computer to allow you to restore a backup when Windows won't start. The second objective is backup files, folders, and full system, which is about the most important thing you can do if you have critical data and you're not storing it in the cloud or something. And finally, the third sub-objective is to schedule backups. Backups, you can run them manually, of course, but nobody ever remembers to do that, so it's really important to schedule them to happen automatically. This is going to be a pretty quick lesson. Now first, they're not going to ask you this on the exam. I just want you to know this. In the real world, this is how small businesses and home users often perform backups versus how enterprises do it. Because on the certification exam, Microsoft takes a very Windows-centric approach, and they want you to know how to use the Windows backup tools. Well, in an enterprise, nobody uses those tools. Nobody. Literally. So in a small business, what users do is they get usually an external USB drive and they plug it into their computer, and then they use the Windows backup tool. Hopefully they schedule the backups, and those backups just happen every night, usually backing up to that external drive. Well, in an enterprise, it gets to be much more complicated because you don't want to be managing a separate USB drive attached to every one of thousands of computers in your organization. That'd be really difficult. Just imagine how many of those drives would break, and then you'd have to go physically visit everybody's desk, and if something gets filled up because the user has too many files, well, you have to go get them a new drive and replace it. Anyway, storage management can be really expensive in an enterprise, and one of the biggest ways enterprises reduce their storage management costs is to move all their storage to a central location. Basically, they take all the disk drives in their organization and stick them in one big data center and attach it to the network. This is called network-attached storage. So this network-attached storage provides massive amounts of storage, could be hundreds and hundreds of terabytes, that all the computers in the organization can use for backups. Sometimes the drives are attached directly to the network. Sometimes they're attached to a backup server, and the backup server just takes all the backup requests and sends them over to the drives. Now, I'll say these enterprise networks, if you back your computers up over a network, well, a given computer could have more than a terabyte of data on it, and even on a gigabit LAN, that can take a lot of bandwidth and a lot of time. It can take several days to back up a computer with lots of data across the network. So enterprises often develop these really high-speed networks for the purposes of online backups. Now, it's that first backup that takes so long because each incremental day, you don't, of course, have to start the entire backup over from scratch. You perform a full backup, which has all the data in it, and then you perform either a differential or an incremental backup. The difference between differential and incremental backups is the differential backup backs up all the data since the last full backup, and the incremental backup backs up just the new data since the last backup of any type, whether it was a full backup, an incremental backup, a differential backup. Do be familiar with the terms incremental and differential for the test. Now, Windows Backup can back up across the network, but it's not all that easily manageable. Windows Backup is really designed to be managed by an individual going to each PC and scheduling tasks. It's also not all that easily monitorable. So if there's a particular file that can't get backed up properly, maybe it's always in use, nobody really gets alerted. Enterprise backup tools have ways to manage this, detect problems really easily, and do it in such a way that a single administrator with thousands of computers can keep up with it all. There's no way anybody could use Windows Backup on thousands of different computers and actually keep up with it. You'd have to go and train each individual employee to use backup, and that's just not practical. Whether you're an enterprise or a small business or just a home user, you also need to think about offline backups. Offline backups take all your data, and instead of storing it right next to your computer, they store it in a different geographic location. This protects you in the event of a fire or a natural disaster, or probably most commonly, a theft. Now, a small business or a home user will perform internet backups to provide this sort of protection. Basically, you'll use a service like Mosey Home or Carbonite and send it across the internet. And an enterprise, they have a couple of different techniques. Often they'll back up all the computers to the local data center and then synchronize that data to an off-site location. If something happens to the primary backup, they can pull it from the off-site location. There's also disk rotation and storage services where from the data center with all the disks that have the backup on them, you'll physically pull them out of the network attached storage, out of the backup servers, and ship them to a location that's usually nearby, but not that close. You want a location that wouldn't be impacted by the same natural disaster, such as an earthquake, a hurricane, or fire, but that doesn't take you all that long to drive to because somebody's got to physically drive there. So there are storage services that just do nothing but store your offsite data for the purposes of disaster recovery. Here's a real-world scenario. We're going to configure automatic backups for Mary. See, Mary has a laptop and she's a bit of a clumsy oaf. Today, on the way to work, I saw her literally drop her laptop bag as she was getting out of the car and it crashed into the ground. And it's working a day, but it's gonna break sometime soon. She's really beating that poor laptop up. So let's connect a USB drive to it and start backups so they happen every night. Here's Mary's computer and the backup drive is connected. So to schedule backups, I'll just search the settings for backup and select the file history option here. So this opens up the file history tool, which we can use to schedule backups. So I'll just click the turn on button. Now you can see by default it just picked an arbitrary drive. If you want to select a specific drive, you can click select drive here. And in fact, it picked media. So we're going to switch it over to backup and then click OK. You'll also see that there's an add network location button that will allow us to back up to another server on the network, or it could be another Windows computer, so long as it had a shared drive with plenty of space for the backups. Now, because I'm changing the drive from the default that it selected, it's asking me if it wants to move over the file history. So we'll just go ahead and let it move it over. So file history is a new backup tool included with Windows 8, and it doesn't entirely replace the old backup tools. File history is great for backing up files. Rather than just backing up every night, it will back it up pretty continuously, even just every couple of hours. And this means you lose less work. If you have a hard drive crash at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, well, if you schedule it every night, you'd lose all the work that you did that day. And for most people, that's really not acceptable. You might be pulling your hair out if you lost a whole day's work just because your hard drive died. So file history is a bit lighter than performing an entire backup, but it just monitors the files that you change and makes a backup copy for you on the drive that you specify. So it'll do it automatically. You don't really need to do anything except select the drive and click turn on. But just to make sure Mary's files are backed up, we'll just click run now. Now let's go and take a look at the drive that we're backing up to. She's backing up to the backup drive here. You can see it creates a folder called file history. And as we dig in, we'll see the configuration folder here contains several different database files that are used to track the files that are backed up. And then the data file contains the actual backup files. So as we dig in, we see it's literally just a copy of the files and then a timestamp in here. So as Mary creates new files, eventually they'll end up copied to this particular location. Now you might also notice that these aren't, say, zipped up in a big file. This makes them really easy to access. You can just readily go and recover your own files. You don't necessarily need to though. And that's all we need to do to back up Mary's documents. But it doesn't back up her entire computer. It just backs up her documents. So it won't back up her apps, for example. And if we need to recover from a backup, what we could do is reinstall Windows from the corporate system image and allow her to install any apps that she needs and then restore all of her files. But she'd also have to reconfigure any apps because it's literally just backing up your documents. Now, if you use all Windows Store apps, well, Microsoft does a pretty good job of synchronizing that automatically between computers, whether you're using an Active Directory account or you're using the Microsoft Live account. So in theory, you don't ever need to back up anything but the files, and file history should be enough for you. In practice, though, we all use desktop apps still, and these desktop apps are not going to be adequately backed up. That means you have to go back and reinstall all your desktop apps, so you have to find all your product keys, and that's kind of a real pain. So for me, I still like to have a full system image backup. So let's go create a system image backup for Mary now. So to perform a system image backup, we're going to use the Windows 7 tools, which are hidden within Windows 8. And to find them, we're going to search the start screen for recovery. Actually, we're going to search the settings. And then we'll see here Windows 7 file recovery. That's confusing, right? Now, these tools are exactly the same thing that you worked with in Windows 7. And if you want to create a Windows 7 style backup rather than using the Windows 8 file history, just come here and then click Setup Backup. But for Mary's sake, we really want to create a system image. So I click the link here, and then it's going to prompt me to choose a disk to save the system image to. You can see it by default, it lists all the external drives or non-system disks basically. So I'll select the backup drive and then click Next. Now I get to select which of the drives I want to back up as part of the system image. And usually you want to select anything that has critical data on it. So you can see on this final page here, it tells me it's going to take about 18 gigabytes of space. That's including every bit of data on Mary's computer. It's going to back up her entire drive. All of her apps will be backed up. She won't have to worry about her product keys or reinstalling anything. She'll be able to start her computer from the Windows 7 or Windows 8 setup DVD and then restore the system image. It's that easy. So I'll click Start Backup here to start the system image backup. Now, while it's possible to schedule a system image backup, it's rather tricky. It's not really built into Windows to perform a system image backup on a regular basis. You can do it with command line tools, but it's probably not going to be covered on your certification exam, so I won't cover it here. For now, we have a system image that we can use to restore Mary's computer if and inevitably when she breaks it. It's not a bad idea to update it every now and then, but as long as you have a recent system image, even if it's from months back, and you have an up-to-date file history, that's usually good enough to get users going. So we'll leave Mary's backup running and go on to the next scenario. Now in this scenario, we're going to create a system recovery disk for Mary. And what this will allow Mary to do is to boot from a USB flash drive and automatically restore her computer from backup, because you know what? We don't need Mary calling us when she does break her laptop. She can take care of this entire thing herself. We just need to make sure she has a system recovery disk. You can also do this simply by booting a computer from a Windows 8 setup DVD and then choosing Repair Your Computer when the option comes up. If your hard drive isn't completely lost, you can also do it by using the advanced startup options, but that's stored on your hard drive. So if your hard drive fails, which is a common scenario when you need to perform a system image recovery, then you're going to need either a Windows setup DVD or a system recovery disk. You know, nowadays computers don't really come with setup DVDs, so that's why you need to create a system recovery disk. So let's go make one for Mary. Here's Mary's computer, and we'll just search the settings for recovery once again. And this time we'll pick Create a Recovery Drive. Click Yes to elevate our privileges. We can see her system image backup is still going on back there. I'll click Next. Now we select the USB flash drive. It's media here. And then click Next. You could see on the previous dialog that it was showing you that it needs 256 megabytes of free space. That's not much nowadays when even the cheapest USB flash drives have 8 gigs. So just about any flash drive will work. And I'll click Create to actually create it. And that's all it took. You could see it formatted it, renamed it, and now we get a chance to look at all the different files. So these are the same files that you would see on the boot drive, which is hidden from within Windows Explorer. But you can see it's got BCD, which is the boot manager, and all the different files that Windows setup needs to get running. Basically, it's just enough files to restore a system image. And you can see that this was running in the background. This was creating Mary's system image. When it was done, it prompted us to automatically create a system repair disk. This would result in the exact same process. We just manually initiated it. So now let's take a quick peek at the Windows image backup. You can see it needs to elevate my privileges because it protects the backup files from being accessed by anybody, even your own user account. That's because the backup files, well, they have every bit of data in all your files, but without all the different file security. So to be safe, it just protects everything. And every time you open up a folder, it's going to prompt you to elevate your privileges, which is why every folder I open, I have to click continue with the little user account control icon there. And we can see as we dig into the different folders, this is Mary's system image backup. Now what you'll see here are 3 different VHDX files. These are virtual hard drive files, and that's how system image works. These are the entire hard drive laid out bit by bit. It's not backing up individual files. It copies the entire hard drive to a virtual hard disk file. It makes it really easy to restore the entire computer, which we'll do in the next scenario. Mary's done it this time. She's completely destroyed her laptop. She dropped it in the toilet. I don't know how she managed that. I don't even want to hear the story behind it. We threw that one away. Nobody wanted to touch it to even try to repair it, but we got her a new laptop because apparently if you drop your laptop in the toilet, we reward you with a new computer. So Mary's got her new computer, and fortunately her backup is safe and sound. So we could boot from either the system recovery disk that we made or the Windows 8 DVD. I happen to have a Windows 8 setup DVD handy, so I'll put that in her computer and connect the backup drive that has her system image stored on it, and we'll get her up and running again. So this is the Windows 8 DVD starting up. And you can see it first prompts you to select a language. This is exactly like the Windows setup. Now, instead of clicking Install Now, we're going to click Repair Your Computer. And this is exactly where you'd pick up if you use the system recovery disk. So I'll click Troubleshoot here, and you get the options to refresh or reset your PC. Those are tasks we've covered in other lessons, but for now, we'll just go into Advanced Options and then use the System Image Recovery tool here. Now, System Image Recovery scans all the drives on your computer, and hopefully it finds your most recent backup. If you have more than one system image backup and you want to make sure you select the right one, you can click Select a System Image here, but for Mary's computer, we're just going to use the most recent backup. Now, by default, System Image is just going to restore all the data back to the drives that you have in the computer now. So you'll need to have replaced whatever system drive she formerly had if you're simply replacing the drive. We gave her a whole new computer, so it has one drive marked bootable, and it's going to use that bootable drive as her system drive. You can go in and change some of the settings. For example, you don't have to restore all of the disks that were previously backed up. You can see we backed up 2 disks, and we could choose to only restore one, or we can choose to restore both of them, but we'll leave it at the default, which is to restore all the disks. So I'll click Next here to continue it, and when I click Finish, it's going to start the recovery process. It has to format the drives that it's restoring to, of course, so the system image that might be on the new computer that you just bought, it's going to be wiped completely clean. So make sure that you're okay with losing all the data on the drive. You don't want anything you love on that computer because it's going to be gone. Now, re-imaging does take a little bit of time, so we'll let this run for a little while. And it looks like the restoration is finished. I don't know why they wait a minute before they restart your computer. who restores a new computer and is like, hey, I'd like to look at a dialog box for 60 seconds. All right, looks good so far. Let's keep our fingers crossed. I'll tell you what, if you've ever lost a hard drive and you're worried about losing access to all of your data, it's such a relief to see the computer come back up and to be able to log on and then get onto your desktop and see that your actual files are there. So let's see if we can see Mary's files. Looks good so far. This is basically the one file that she had there. So I would say we successfully restored Mary's backup. Now, as a side effect, notice that her old hard drive was a 25 gig hard drive, and the hard drive that I put in new was much bigger. So let's take a look at the computer management console. Under disk management. So you can see that as I restored the backup, it took this 300 gig hard drive and made a 25 gig partition that exactly matched the partition size of her old hard drive. Mary got a free disk backup here, but it's not taking advantage of all the space. So after you do a recovery like this, if you replace the old drive with a bigger drive, you want to right-click the drive here in disk management and then extend the volume. You can basically just accept the default settings on the wizard here. And now you can see the volume is a full 325 gigabytes. So I'll check this space once again. And suddenly she has much more capacity than she did previously. This is Tony Northrup for Train Signal, and I hope you found the lesson both educational and enjoyable. And I'll see you next time.